Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I really wanted to talk about something here that I saw actually in an article here from Screen Rant. And so if you do want to check out the article, I will leave a link down below in the description of this video. So definitely go and do that. But it just really got me thinking. And, I went back to what Gimple said, last week or it was the week before or whatever. But, in terms of when Rick and Michonne could return to the Walking Dead again. And I really thought about the quote that he said. And I thought about in terms of reunions and stuff, I really question the idea of how is it actually going to happen? Is it going to be something where Rick and Michonne are just I don't know where, just at the Commonwealth or something, and then everyone shows up like something out of Avengers Endgame, where we see Daryl and then we see Negan and then Maggie, etc. No, it's not going to be like that, right? We're not going to see everyone reunite all in the same way. Things will happen most likely in a different way where we do see Rick and Negan reunite much earlier than we see Rick and Daryl. And I think it'll happen that way because Rick and Daryl reuniting is really it's the big reunion, right? I would say out of all the characters, which is kind of insane to say, but it really is. It's sort of how everyone views it. Those characters reuniting would be absolutely massive. It would be really just honestly incredible to see those characters together. And again, you don't want to end the story with them just reuniting. You want an actual story with them, right? So you would want it to be done very similar to how The Ones Who Live was done. And so it got me thinking, in terms of everyone reuniting, it would be, a lot of screen time to show all of that, if you were doing one series focused on all of that. Well, like I said, it's likely not going to happen like that. So when you read what Gimple said, does it make sense that Rick could actually return in the Walking Dead Dead City and maybe have a story there? Well, I want to get into that. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all of my Walking Dead content like this. There's a big special coming up, not this Sunday, but it is the Sunday afterwards, and so I will do a video breaking down everything that we learn. I expect a lot more teasers coming out this week, as well as at some point a trailer, right? There's got to be a trailer at some point coming out, so yeah, whenever that does come out, I will do a video breaking down everything in depth, and get ready for a new Walking Dead season to begin here, because it's been quite a while. I'm not saying I wasn't excited for the Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2, but a lot of people watched it before the show even came out, or right after episode 1 came out, which was, very frustrating. I waited every single week. I watched every single Sunday, but a lot of people didn't. And so it definitely sort of hurt the excitement for that season overall. And so really the last season where it felt really exciting to watch The Walking Dead was The Ones Who Live, right? And then before that was Daryl Dixon Season 1, and then Dead City Season 1 and whatnot. Or I guess Fear was there as well, because we were all wondering, how was that going to end? But Dead City Season 2, it's 8 episodes and a lot of classic Walking Dead stuff returning, so I'm excited. But yeah, let's get into what I wanted to talk about here. So, I saw this here in an article from Screen Rant, and it really got me thinking about Rick's return at some point here. I mean, we're all wondering when he's going to return just in general, right? But it really got me thinking about how he's actually going to return. And it's exactly this quote right here from the article. It kind of makes sense that there should be a follow-up to this story here. Rick and Negan's story, it's not over yet. And so this quote right here from the article, again, I'll leave a link down below if you do want to check out the article. It goes into it a lot more in depth here. I'm referencing this one part here, but it says, despite the hatred Rick might feel for his former enemy, Negan helped save his daughter and managed to turn his life around, just as Carl hoped, indicating that a scene between the two would be full of tension and emotion. That right there, it's not just for Negan as well, because I feel like for Negan, he's changed his life around a lot. He really has. And when you really look at Rick and Negan's final scene together, it was a lot of, Rick trying to prove that he was right, and then Negan was like, no, I'm going to prove this or whatever. They really were just, they were enemies still. And I think all of these years later, we've seen how much Negan has changed over the years that I think Rick would be really, really surprised here. And he's done a lot of good. He really has. And of course, Rick hasn't seen it yet. And, I think in general, I want to see Rick's reaction to the fact that he's not in that cell anymore. What does that mean? Is he okay with it? Because yes, he wanted to keep him alive, obviously just as Carl wanted, but is he okay with him being out there? That's different, right? I mean, I don't even know if Rick could even put him back in that cell anymore, though, because I feel like Negan would just be like, no, I'm not doing that. Though there's a lot of people that want him right now, right? New Babylon and stuff. So I feel like, honestly, he would have to run. So it would be different now because of Judith and also Michonne as well. It's one of the things that The Ones Who Live just never touched on, which was what was happening back home with certain characters and certain storylines, like the Whisperers and all that. We didn't get to see Rick's reaction to a lot of that. And I think people in general just feel that, that was sort of missed. And I think having him show up in some way and touching on a lot of these storylines would be incredible. So I think for Rick to see Negan in a different place, to see that, obviously he helped save his daughter, and just what he's done since then, like, it would prove to Rick that what Carl wanted was right? And it would just be such an incredible, really impactful moment when he realizes that I could have killed Negan back then, back in season 8 at the very end of All Out War. But what would that have done? Like, yeah, I get my revenge, but what would that have done? He's learned a lot since then. He's helped people, and it really has changed a lot of this situation here. And so I think the Carl aspect to this here is really what needs to be told here in all of this, because it's not over yet. It really isn't. There's a lot of stuff they're able to touch on with this. Like that, ending scene there between the two in season 9 really felt like it was the beginning of something new. I mean, the very first episode of that season was called A New Beginning, right? And I mean, as much as that obviously meant a lot for Rick and like the other characters, I think Negan specifically it meant a lot for. And I think all of these years later, for him to actually be in a situation where he did change his life around, he did, obviously we see in season 2 he has Lucille, but we've heard from Jeffrey Dean Morgan a lot, like, it's not going to be the same as what it was. Obviously, we're going to get those cool scenes, because obviously that's just sort of, you want entertainment, right? Like, you want to see that. So I just feel like you got to have those scenes where Negan is like acting like his old savior self. Like that just, I want to see that, right? Like you do have to have that there, but it's not going to be as simple as like, oh, he's just enjoying it. Like I think he'll put on a show, but when he's back in his room and whatnot, I think he'll be like, like maybe not liking what he had to do sort of thing. So I think that's sort of where they're going with it. We'll see where it goes though, because I know they've been mentioning that it goes in a lot of different places in general, but again, the Carl aspect to this makes this very, very fascinating. I think that alone is a reason to do this here. And I think that's why a Rick and Negan reunion, before, you get into the whole big reunion with everyone, with Daryl and whatnot, I think is sort of what you should do. I think you should have Rick reuniting with all the other characters separately before you actually have him reunite with Daryl, because I really, I was thinking about it, how would you have them all reuniting? Again, it's not going to be like Avengers Endgame where everyone's together. Maybe you have a cool scene like that where everyone shows up together and it's like, whoa, you have this really amazing shot where they're all running at the zombies. They're all standing in a line and there's thousands of zombies coming at them or something, some really cool stuff. But I just feel like you want to have the reunions and all that beforehand, right? And so to get into Gimple's quote again, and I talked about this a lot last week, but I really want to read this quote. And now, based off of a lot of what I said, is this what Gimple's talking about here? Because there's been some rumors of some things potentially happening for Dead City Season 2's, finale, maybe there was a post-credit scene, or at least I think that could be what happens. Because I know that they were filming something, and it was a one-day thing, and it was rumored to be The Walking Dead related, but it wasn't ever really confirmed. And so I'm just wondering, was it a post-credit scene for something like this? And I mean, are we going to see something in terms of all of this announced at some point in the next couple of months here? Or I guess when Dead City's over, right? But let's get into Gimple's quote here on the whole situation. So, I mean, the plan was to keep it limited. Not necessarily never to see those characters again, but to keep it limited. But I always say, you never know. There's so many, I've been careful not to say, oh, that'll never happen, because it does. So, there are possibilities, and there's possibilities of all sorts of strange iterations of shows with those characters and with other characters. So, I think it's entirely possible. And that was referencing whether or not we're going to see Rick and Michonne again at some point, if it's a season 2 or a new series or just whatever. Are we going to see Rick and Michonne again? And that was his response right there. And really, when you read what he says there, it really makes it seem like The Ones Who Live was a limited series. I think to do a season 2 could make sense. You could still always make the argument for it, but a season 2, it wouldn't be about Rick and Michonne. I feel like you want The Ones Who Live to be about Rick and Michonne. So maybe just do a new series, and then the focus doesn't have to be on Rick and Michonne, right? They're going to be the lead characters anyways, but it doesn't have to be the story doesn't have to be all about them reuniting, because obviously they've already reunited. So there would be another story there. And with what he's saying here, it almost seems like, in terms of the strange iterations of shows with those characters, or just the possibilities of just how can this work kind of thing. I feel like it makes some sense for Rick to show up in potentially Dead City. And again, because of what I was talking about before in terms of Rick and Negan reuniting and doing all of that, it makes so much sense. Like, it really does make a lot of sense. I could totally see this happening and honestly being really incredible for the show here. So could Rick show up in Dead City? Yes, it could definitely happen, because I think that before you get to the final reunion, you want to have something like that happen, because like I was saying, I think Rick and Daryl reuniting is like the biggest one. It's the big reunion that, like, if it happened in a series on its own, say it happens in episode 3 of that series, like, you don't want Rick and Negan reuniting in episode 2. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want every episode to be such a big thing of like, oh, this character's reuniting with this character in this episode, and it's like this whole big thing, right? Like, you kind of want some of that stuff happening throughout the years before you get to like this very final, you know, end game series. And I think that in terms of, you know, reuniting Rick and Daryl, that's the biggest one right there. It really is. And I think, you know, I think there's some debate still, like, should you save that reunion until the very final story, or should Rick and Daryl reunite first and then you have some more story with them? I mean, I think that if anything, they're going to reunite in a way that Rick and Michonne reunited, where it's earlier in a series and then you just sort of have a story as well with them. But I still think in terms of Rick, you know, having that story, like that Carl connection and all that with Negan, that it does have to happen at some point beforehand. And based off of what Gimple said there in terms of, you know, it doesn't have to be like necessarily a season 2, like there's strange iterations of things that could happen with those characters and all of that. And again, I'm paraphrasing there a lot, but I think it makes sense that that's probably what he's referencing there. Just, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a new series, but these characters could appear in other spin-offs and whatnot. And I remember at Andy Lincoln News's tweet earlier this year, which was, you know, like Andrew Lincoln or Rick Grimes or whatever it was, you know, could appear in another Walking Dead spinoff at some point. And obviously the post, I mean, it could have been just, you know, sort of wondering about it, like throwing the question out there, or it was just like a tease at something, because again, the account is very credible. And yeah, I get it. It's sort of hard to read in general, but when you're just looking at all of it there, I'm really wondering if there is something there, because again, it doesn't have to mean that like this is the last time that, like, you know, if Rick was in Dead City and saw Maggie and Negan, that it's the last time they're ever going to see each other. Because obviously when they all reunite in like a different show, if it's the Endgame series or whatever, everyone's going to see Rick again, right? Everyone's going to see Michonne again. But I think to have Rick appear in the show here, to have a really interesting story with the character, it would make the show a lot more fun. It really would. And it makes sense based off of where the characters are right now, that something like that would happen just based off of what Negan is doing in New York City as well. If he literally becomes the ruler of like Manhattan or whatever you would call it, right? Like, he would be way more powerful than he was during the Savior arc. And, you know, Rick finding out about that, yeah, he's going to have some issues with that. And again, it might not be necessarily Negan being the villain again, but that's just the position that he's in and everyone's going to hear about it. And so obviously that's just how people are going to find out. Rick would find that out. Maybe he'd go after him after that, right? But I think, you know, once he sort of learns what's really going on and everything, then I think that he would realize that, yeah, Negan has changed quite a bit. And you sort of get to their last conversation. You get into a lot of that, and man, some really incredible, just amazing scenes. You could actually do the comic scene after where Rick and Negan are helping each other, trying to survive like a wave of zombies that's going through Alexandria. Like, maybe you're not in Alexandria, maybe you're in New York City or something like that, but you could actually do that story that we just never got from the comic. I think it would be honestly insane. So incredible, and I could totally see this story being done, and I think it could really work. Like, even if Rick shows up in the last like 2 episodes or something of that show, and then he's not there for say like a season 3 or 4, or say this happens in season 3, it's teased in season 2, but it's going to happen in season 3, and then maybe at the end of season 3 he shows up or something, but in season 4 Rick's not there, that's fine. Like, I think people just want some of the story here to pay off a little bit, right? To have some excitement there, because Rick showed up. I mean, there could be other characters that could show up as well, right? And now we're building slowly to that reunion. So I really do wonder. I really wonder if Rick could actually be in Dead City. I think out of all the shows, this is the one show where it could actually happen. And so I'm really going to look out for it, because we have Laurent and Ash obviously going back to the Commonwealth. There's a lot of things here where there's some pieces being put together here or laid down where I think we can start to see, you know, how this endgame story is going to start to come together. Daryl Dixon season 2 really did start that, and I'm really interested in seeing how Dead City season 2 is going to further that, because you know that it's going to happen. Like, Gimple definitely has a lot of plans here. So yeah, but I will leave it here though. Make sure to post all your thoughts down below on all of this. Do you think that what Gimple's talking about is in reference to Rick appearing in the other spinoffs. Now, it makes sense that, you know, in terms of Daryl Dixon, it's a little bit harder, right? Because of where he's at. But for Dead City, it does make a lot more sense. And again, based off of the article I was reading from Screen Rant, I just got this inspiration to sort of talk about this all together. And it just, honestly, it adds up quite a bit. I feel like having Rick appear in Dead City needs to happen now. So I really am on board with that. And I don't think it's going to happen right away in season 2. Maybe there's already set up, you know, for the finale here. And so maybe it'll happen in season 3, but we'll have to wait and see, right? I do think that there's going to be something announced in terms of another spinoff or other crossovers and all that announced this summer at Comic-Con. So we'll have to wait and see, but I'm going to leave it here. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video. Make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all of my Walking Dead content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.